The encounter in the sky. Serena Jackson, a self-made black billionaire, known for her sharp mind, business acumen, and compassionate work in philanthropy, had always preferred to remain understated despite her vast wealth. She had risen from humble beginnings to become one of the most influential women in the world, but she never let her wealth define her. Her style was simple, her manner approachable, and her demeanor humble. For her, power was in the ability to make a difference, not in flaunting privilege. On this particular day, Serena boarded a flight after a grueling week of business meetings. She was exhausted, her mind churning with details from her latest philanthropic project, a global initiative aimed at providing sustainable education to underprivileged children. As she entered the first-class cabin, she looked forward to the solace of her window seat, hoping to steal a few hours of rest and reflection before diving back into work. Serena wore her usual attire, a comfortable, modest ensemble that offered no hint of her immense fortune. She placed her single, unassuming handbag in the overhead compartment, took her seat by the window, and prepared to lose herself in a book. But peace was fleeting that day. As she settled into her seat, a flight attendant named Bethany approached her with a sour expression. Bethany, in her late 30s, had a reputation for being meticulous and, at times, overly rigid. She took pride in providing first-class service, but her version of standards sometimes strayed into judgment. Bethany looked Serena up and down with a faint sneer, her eyes narrowing as she noticed Serena's understated outfit and calm, unpretentious demeanor. To Bethany, first class was reserved for those who looked the part, and Serena, with her plain clothes and minimal accessories, did not fit the image. "Excuse me, ma'am," Bethany said, her voice laced with barely veiled skepticism. "Are you sure you're in the right cabin? Economy class is further back." Serena, taken aback by the insinuation, looked up at Bethany, maintaining her composure. She was no stranger to subtle, and sometimes blatant, forms of discrimination, but she hadn't expected it here, not in a space where she was a paying first-class passenger. "This is my seat," Serena replied calmly, offering a polite smile, though a spark of irritation flickered beneath her cool exterior. Bethany's lips pressed into a thin line. Without another word, she demanded Serena's ticket with a curt gesture. Serena complied, handing over the ticket without protest, but there was a glint of steel in her gaze that hinted at her patience wearing thin. Bethany inspected the ticket far longer than necessary, flipping it over as if expecting to find a flaw. When she found none, she handed it back, her expression unchanged. Instead of apologizing, Bethany continued, her tone sharpened. "I see, but perhaps you misunderstood. There's a certain standard here in first class." Serena's temper flared, but she kept her voice steady, not wanting to make a scene. "I understand quite well. Thank you. And I meet that standard." Before Bethany could respond, a few of the surrounding passengers began to glance over, sensing the tension. Some turned away, pretending not to notice, while others watched with growing curiosity, wondering why the calm woman by the window was being questioned. Bethany, feeling the stares, finally withdrew, though her eyes held a look of disdain as she muttered, "We'll see about that." Serena tried to settle back into her seat, hoping the unpleasant encounter was over. But she could feel the sting of the interaction settle like a weight on her chest. She had faced prejudice countless times, but each instance left a new scar, a fresh reminder of the biases she had fought her entire life to overcome. Moments later, as she tried to distract herself with her book, she noticed a commotion near the cockpit. Bethany had gone to the captain, whispering urgently while casting glances toward Serena. The captain, a middle-aged man with a hard expression and an air of authority, looked over at Serena with an unmistakable judgment in his eyes. Without a word, he strode over to Serena's seat. The pilot, Captain William Grant, was known for his no-nonsense approach. However, he was also known for his biases, which were not easily concealed beneath his uniform. Captain Grant looked down at Serena, his face an impassive mask. "We've received a report of a disturbance," he stated, his tone cold and authoritative. "If you cannot comply with our flight attendant's instructions, we'll have to ask you to leave." Serena looked up at him, a mixture of disbelief and anger flashing in her eyes. "I haven't caused any disturbance, Captain," she said evenly, struggling to keep her tone calm. "I simply asked to sit in the seat I paid for." Captain Grant didn't bother to listen. Instead, he turned to Bethany, whose expression had shifted into one of triumph. "Is this the passenger who's causing the trouble?" Bethany nodded, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Yes, Captain." "She refuses to cooperate." Without hesitation, the captain turned back to Serena, his face hardening further. "This is your final warning. If you don't move to the appropriate class, we will have to ask you to disembark." The crowd in first class had gone silent, their eyes darting between Serena, the captain, and Bethany. Whispers began to circulate, some passengers expressing sympathy, while others wore expressions of quiet judgment. Serena took a deep breath, her voice firm but dignified. "I am a first-class passenger with a valid ticket, and I expect to be treated as such. If you have an issue with that, perhaps you should reconsider your stance on customer service." Her words, calm yet powerful, seemed to hit a nerve. Captain Grant's face contorted with anger, and before Serena could process what was happening, he raised his hand and delivered a harsh slap to her cheek. The sound echoed in the cabin, and gasps erupted around them. Serena's hand flew to her cheek, the sting of the slap both physical and emotional. She was speechless, shocked that a professional, a pilot entrusted with the safety of hundreds, could behave so recklessly. The stunned silence that followed was filled with tension, disbelief, and a simmering anger building within Serena. The other passengers, paralyzed by the spectacle, exchanged horrified glances, some of them too stunned to react, while others were visibly uncomfortable. As Serena held her hand to her cheek, she steadied herself. This was not just an insult. It was an injustice, a stark display of the prejudice she had long fought against. But she would not allow them to get away with this. Not this time. With a steely gaze, Serena looked up at Captain Grant and Bethany, her expression one of unbreakable resolve. "You've made a grave mistake. This will not go unanswered." In that moment, as the cabin remained still, Serena's mind was already moving, plotting her next steps. She wouldn't be silenced or humiliated. The world would know what had happened here, and both the captain and flight attendant would come to regret their actions. But this wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. Serena knew she had the power to not only hold them accountable, but to ensure that no one else would suffer the same indignity. As she walked off the plane, every step was a declaration of her intention. The fight had only just begun. The power of a silent resolve. Serena left the plane with her head held high, the faint sting of Captain Grant's slap still fresh on her cheek, not just in sensation, but as a wound to her dignity. She could feel the eyes of passengers trailing her as she walked out of the jet bridge into the bustling terminal. The whispers, the shocked glances, none of it mattered now. All she felt was a deep, smoldering sense of purpose growing within her. This was not just a matter of pride. It was a call to justice. As she made her way through the airport, her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from her executive team, legal advisors, and trusted confidants. She had already reached out to them as soon as she left the plane, giving them a brief rundown of the incident, enough for them to understand the severity of the situation. Her team was swift. They knew Serena well enough to recognize when something required immediate action. And this was not just any case. It was a matter that struck at the core of Serena's values, her entire journey, and what she stood for. After finding a quiet corner in the airport's VIP lounge, Serena took a moment to gather her thoughts. She looked at her reflection in the glass window, the dim lights casting a soft glow over her face. There was a faint redness on her cheek, a reminder of the pilot's thoughtless slap. She traced the mark lightly with her fingers, feeling a rush of anger, yet beneath it, a fierce determination. She had the power to fight back, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been humiliated, dismissed, or judged simply for who they were. Taking a deep breath, she opened her phone and dialed her attorney, Maria Foster, one of the sharpest legal minds in the country and a close friend. Maria had been with Serena through thick and thin, understanding the depth of her journey, the struggles she had overcome, and the principles she held dear. "Maria," Serena began, her voice calm yet laced with steely resolve, "I want an investigation launched immediately. We're not just dealing with a case of personal assault. This is about setting a precedent, ensuring this kind of behavior is uprooted from the industry." Maria, always quick to grasp the gravity of any situation, responded without hesitation. "Of course, Serena. I'll reach out to the airline's legal department, but we won't stop there. We'll gather witness testimonies from passengers, secure airport surveillance footage, and file a formal complaint with aviation authorities. This is unacceptable." Serena could feel her anger subsiding as Maria outlined the plan. It was being channeled into action, into something constructive. "I don't want this to be swept under the rug, Maria. Too many people have had to endure this type of treatment, and it's time someone put an end to it." "Understood," Maria replied, a note of determination echoing Serena's. "We'll make sure it's handled with the urgency it deserves." After hanging up, Serena continued to sit in the quiet lounge, her thoughts drifting back to the event. She knew what she had to do, but she also knew that this was not merely a matter of revenge. It was a chance to bring about real change, to expose and dismantle the prejudice that still lingered beneath the surface in so many areas of society, even at her level of wealth and influence. The next morning, Serena's legal team had already begun the investigation, interviewing several passengers from the flight. The responses were swift and supportive. Most passengers were appalled by what they had witnessed and expressed their willingness to testify on Serena's behalf. The airline's legal department, however, was less cooperative. They attempted to downplay the incident, dismissing it as a misunderstanding and attempting to handle it internally. But Serena was not one to be silenced or placated by vague promises of internal review. Her attorney reached out to the media, discreetly informing them of the story while withholding Serena's name to avoid a media circus. Within hours, whispers of the incident began to circulate online, sparking outrage and discussions on social media about discrimination, racial bias, and the unacceptable treatment faced by people of color, even in spaces supposedly reserved for the elite. Serena watched the growing reactions with a sense of validation. It wasn't about her ego. It was about shining a light on an issue that far too many people endured in silence. As she scrolled through comments of support and outrage, she knew she was doing the right thing. Her personal brand was one of respect and integrity, and she intended to use her position to advocate for these values. But Serena wasn't done yet. She reached out to her public relations manager, Caleb, with an idea that was both daring and strategic. "Caleb, I want to do something bigger than just a statement. I want to hold a press conference, not about the incident, but about our airline's commitment to setting a new standard for respect and equality," Serena explained. Caleb, who was used to Serena's bold approach, agreed without hesitation. "Absolutely, Serena. This could be a powerful move, not only to address the incident, but to position you as a leader in corporate responsibility and ethical standards." Within days, the press conference was arranged. Serena decided to hold it in New York, a place she considered the heartbeat of diversity and resilience. The turnout was immense. Media outlets from across the country gathered, eager to hear her take on the incident, though she had been careful not to reveal too much beforehand. On the day of the conference, Serena stood before a crowd of reporters and cameras, her calm composure masking the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She began by recounting her journey, the struggles she had overcome, the barriers she had faced as a Black woman rising to prominence in the business world. She spoke of the values she held dear, dignity, respect, and equality, and how they were the foundation of her life's work. Then, she recounted the incident on the plane, not as a victim, but as a champion for change. "When I was slapped by the pilot, And when I was judged by the flight attendant based solely on my appearance, I was reminded that no amount of money or success could shield someone from discrimination. It was a painful moment, yes, but it was also a powerful reminder of why I do what I do. It is moments like these that remind us of the deep-rooted biases that still exist, even in the highest echelons of society. She paused, letting her words settle in the room. This isn't just about me. This is about every individual who has ever been judged, marginalized, or dismissed because of their race, gender, or background. This incident has ignited a fire within me, not of anger, but of determination. I am committed to using my platform to enact real, lasting change. Her words resonated deeply, and she could see the emotional response in the faces of those watching. Reporters shifted, and murmurs spread through the room. Serena's stance had transformed the narrative. She wasn't a billionaire demanding revenge. She was a leader, a voice for the oppressed, using her influence to challenge systemic issues. As the conference concluded, Serena felt a deep sense of purpose. She knew that change wouldn't happen overnight. But this was the beginning of a movement. By the end of the day, headlines across the country were buzzing with her powerful message, reaching people who had never heard her name before. Back at her office later that evening, Serena received an email from the airline's board of directors requesting an urgent meeting. She knew the pressure was mounting on them. The media attention, the public outrage, and her call for reform had left them with little choice but to address the matter. In the meeting, the board offered her a formal apology and a promise of action. But Serena was not interested in empty promises. She demanded a restructuring of their policies, a commitment to diversity training, and a complete overhaul of their customer service standards. "This isn't about appeasing me," she told them firmly. "This is about setting an example for every company in the industry. Discrimination has no place in this day and age, and it's time we make that clear." Seeing her resolve, the board agreed to implement her proposed changes. Serena left the meeting knowing that her fight was beginning to bear fruit. She had turned an experience of humiliation into a catalyst for change, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Serena returned to her office that night, exhausted but triumphant. She knew the journey wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever lay ahead. She had found a new purpose in her work, a mission that transcended profits and fame. This was about justice, about respect, about paving the way for a world where everyone, regardless of their background, could be treated with the dignity they deserved. As she gazed out the window, Serena allowed herself a small smile. The slap that was meant to belittle her had only made her stronger, had only fueled her passion. She was ready to face whatever came next, with the knowledge that she was fighting not just for herself, but for every voice that had ever been silenced, igniting the flame of change. Serena sat in her office the next morning, her mind racing as she reviewed the reports from her team. The previous day's press conference had been a resounding success, resonating with people from all walks of life who were tired of the everyday injustices that they, too, had endured. Her story was now a symbol, a rallying cry for those who had ever felt mistreated, dismissed, or discriminated against. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, with messages flooding in from people who were inspired by her courage and her dedication to making a difference. But Serena wasn't one to be swept away by praise. She knew that applause didn't lead to lasting change. Actions did, and she was ready to take action. Her assistant, Layla, knocked softly on the door, bringing in a stack of documents that Serena had requested. "The feedback from the press conference has been overwhelmingly positive, Ms. Jackson," Layla said with a smile, though her tone held a sense of awe. "You've started something much bigger than just addressing that single incident." Serena looked up, nodding thoughtfully. "Thank you, Layla. This is only the beginning. I want every person who works for my airline to understand the weight of their actions. This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about the culture that allows people like that pilot and attendant to believe they can act without consequence." Serena flipped through the stack of documents, her eyes skimming over employee conduct policies, diversity and inclusion guidelines, and customer service protocols. She had already put together a team to review these policies, but it became clear that much more needed to be done. The airline's policies were outdated, filled with vague statements and loopholes that allowed for biased behavior to go unchecked. Serena knew it wasn't enough to simply enforce stricter rules. She needed to transform the airline's culture from the inside out. "Layla, I want every employee, from pilots and flight attendants to ground staff, to undergo mandatory cultural sensitivity and anti-discrimination training," Serena said, her voice firm with resolve. "And I don't mean a one-time session. I'm talking about a comprehensive program with ongoing assessments and real-world applications." Layla nodded, jotting down notes. "I'll make sure this is implemented across all departments. Should we begin with a pilot program?" "No," Serena replied decisively. "This needs to be rolled out company-wide. I want this to be an undeniable part of our identity. I want everyone who steps onto one of our planes or into one of our offices to feel respected and valued." Layla's admiration was evident. "Understood, Ms. Jackson. I'll get our training team on it immediately." As Layla left the room, Serena allowed herself a moment to take in the gravity of what she was about to do. She had always believed that power and wealth should be used to create positive change, but this was the first time she was initiating something so deeply personal and so profoundly impactful. She turned her attention to the feedback from passengers who had witnessed the incident. Many had already come forward, eager to share their perspective and add their voices to the movement Serena was igniting. She read through statements from people who had seen what happened on the plane, each recounting the incident with shock and disbelief. Some shared their own stories of discrimination, instances of being unfairly treated by airline staff, and their gratitude for someone like Serena taking a stand. Reading these accounts was both heart-wrenching and motivating. Serena had always known that discrimination was an ugly reality, but hearing these stories firsthand made her realize just how deeply ingrained the problem was. It wasn't just about one rude flight attendant or one biased pilot. This was a systemic issue, and it was her responsibility to address it. A week later, Serena called a meeting with the airline's executive board. They sat around the sleek, glass conference table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. They knew why they were there, but the extent of Serena's intentions had not yet been revealed to them. She began the meeting by recounting her experience on the plane, sparing no detail about the humiliation and frustration she had endured. The room was silent as she spoke, each executive aware of the gravity of the situation, but not quite prepared for what was coming next. "This incident is not just a matter of personal insult," Serena said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "It's a reflection of a much larger issue that has gone unchecked for far too long. And it's going to stop here." One of the executives, a middle-aged man named Philip, cleared his throat nervously. "Ms. Jackson, we are, of course, horrified by what happened, and will do whatever it takes to make sure those responsible are disciplined." Serena's eyes hardened. "Discipline is not enough, Philip. This is not about scapegoating a couple of employees and calling it a day. We need to implement real change, starting from the ground up." She outlined her plan, detailing the comprehensive training program, the overhaul of customer service policies, and the creation of a new accountability system where any reports of discrimination would be investigated thoroughly and transparently. Serena wanted the entire company to undergo a transformation, a commitment to inclusivity, respect, and dignity for all. Another executive, a woman named Janet, looked both inspired and apprehensive. "This is ambitious, Serena. I completely agree with your intentions, but implementing something on this scale will take time, resources, and a lot of buy-in." Serena met her gaze with unwavering confidence. "I am aware of the challenges, Janet, but this isn't negotiable. I'd rather invest every resource we have into creating a company that stands for justice and integrity than to continue allowing prejudice to thrive in our ranks." The room was silent as her words settled in. The executives exchanged glances, realizing the depth of Serena's commitment. They knew that this wasn't just a passing moment of outrage. This was a transformative vision from a woman determined to make her mark on the industry in a way that would be remembered. In the days that followed, Serena's team got to work. They began by hiring experts in diversity and inclusion to develop the training program, making sure it would be thorough, practical, and impactful. Serena was involved in every step, reviewing each module, ensuring that it wasn't just theoretical but included real-life scenarios and interactive sessions that would challenge employees' perspectives. She personally reached out to several prominent civil rights organizations, inviting them to collaborate on the program. Serena wanted voices from outside the corporate bubble, people who could bring in fresh perspectives and ensure that the program was grounded in real-world understanding. The organizations were more than willing, excited to work with someone who had the resources and influence to drive change on a grand scale. The airline's customer service protocols were also undergoing a complete overhaul. Serena introduced a new, robust system for filing complaints, ensuring that every report of misconduct would be investigated with transparency and impartiality. Passengers could now report any incidents directly to a third-party compliance officer, bypassing internal bias and guaranteeing a fair review. The response from employees was mixed. Some welcomed the changes, understanding the need for them and appreciating the progressive stance Serena was taking. But others felt uncomfortable, resentful even, seeing these new policies as unnecessary or intrusive. Serena was aware that resistance was inevitable, but she remained undeterred. One afternoon, during a scheduled meeting with the pilots and cabin crew, she addressed the entire team via video call. She spoke from her heart, not as a billionaire CEO, but as a woman who had been deeply hurt by the actions of a few within their ranks. I know that some of you might feel that these changes are unnecessary, that they're an overreaction to one incident. Serena began, her voice calm but firm. But I want you to understand that this is not just about what happened to me. This is about creating an environment where every passenger and every employee feels safe, respected, and valued. It's about building a culture of dignity. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. I'm asking you to join me in this. I'm asking you to embrace this change, to see it not as a burden, but as an opportunity to make our airline a symbol of respect and excellence. This isn't about punishment. This is about growth. The room fell silent. Some nodded in agreement, while others averted their gaze, uncomfortable with the intensity of her conviction. But Serena had planted a seed, and she knew that in time, her message would take root. As the call ended, Serena sat back, exhaling deeply. This was just the beginning. She was prepared for the journey ahead, knowing it would be long and challenging. But she had made a promise to herself, to her passengers, and to all those who had ever been marginalized, that she would fight, not just for her own dignity, but for the dignity of all. The incident on that plane may have been intended to humiliate her, but it had only fueled her resolve. Serena Jackson was no longer just a billionaire. She was a beacon of change, and she was ready to make her airline, and perhaps the world, a place where everyone, regardless of their background, could fly with pride and respect. The unveiling of a new era. Serena's reform initiatives were progressing steadily, but she knew that changing the mindset of an entire corporation required more than policies. It needed visible, transformative actions. She decided that it was time to hold a company-wide meeting, one that would be broadcasted to every office, flight crew, and ground support team across the globe. This was her chance to lay out the future vision for the airline, to instill a sense of purpose in every employee, and to make it clear that this was not merely an initiative, but a profound, permanent shift. On the day of the meeting, Serena arrived at the headquarters early. The vast auditorium, fitted with state-of-the-art technology, was set up to connect with employees from all time zones. As she looked out at the seats slowly filling with senior executives, managers, and representatives from various departments, Serena felt the weight of the moment. She knew she would face skepticism, resentment, and perhaps even hostility. But she also knew that this was her moment to ignite change on a scale that few had ever attempted. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room as Serena stepped onto the stage, her silhouette cast against the bright lights. She wore a simple, elegant suit, her expression calm but resolute. With a deep breath, she began. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here today," she started, her voice echoing throughout the hall and into countless conference rooms, cockpits, and employee lounges around the world. Today is not just another day. It's a turning point, a defining moment for all of us, for this airline, and for what we stand for. She paused, scanning the room, letting her words sink in. I'm sure by now, most of you are aware of the incident that took place a few weeks ago on one of our flights. Many of you may also know that I was the person at the center of that incident. But today, I'm not here to talk about what happened to me. I'm here to talk about what we're going to do to ensure that incidents like that never happen again. Not to me, not to any of you, and not to a single passenger who steps foot on one of our planes. Her tone was unwavering, and her words hung heavy in the air. She could see the tension in some faces, but there was also a glimmer of curiosity, a sense of anticipation. Serena continued, her gaze direct and unflinching. Today, I am announcing the launch of a new program, one that will redefine what it means to work for this airline. It's called the Dignity and Respect Initiative. And it's not just a program, it's a promise. It's a commitment to make our airline a place where every person is treated with fairness, respect, and dignity. This is a commitment to make our company a leader in equality, in empathy, and in professionalism. She clicked a button on a small remote, and a screen behind her displayed the core principles of the initiative: respect, accountability, diversity, and inclusion. The words were large, bold, and impossible to ignore. These 4 principles will become the foundation of everything we do, she said, her voice steady but filled with passion. Respect means we honor the humanity in every person, no matter their background, position, or appearance. Accountability means that we take responsibility for our actions and their impact on others. Diversity means we celebrate the richness that comes from different cultures, perspectives, and experiences. And inclusion means that everyone, regardless of who they are, feels welcome and valued here. She looked out at the audience, sensing the quiet stir of reactions. This wasn't just rhetoric. This was a vision of transformation. Serena knew that for many, these words would resonate deeply, and for others, they would challenge long-held beliefs. But she was ready for that challenge. Some of you may wonder, why now? Why such a large-scale change? Serena said, addressing the unspoken questions in the room. The answer is simple. We cannot claim to be a world-class airline if we don't treat each other and our passengers with world-class respect. Our reputation, our legacy, and our future depend on it. She saw a few nods in the crowd, a sign that her words were reaching them. Encouraged, she moved to the next phase of her plan. Serena then introduced the key components of the Dignity and Respect Initiative. Each element was designed not only to address the existing problems but to preemptively prevent them from happening again. The initiative included cultural sensitivity training. Every employee, from the top executives to ground staff, would be required to undergo immersive hands-on training designed to foster empathy and understanding. This was not a one-time session, but an ongoing series that would be revisited annually, with regular assessments to ensure its impact. Anonymous reporting system. Serena knew that for change to be effective, people needed to feel safe reporting misconduct. The new reporting system would allow employees and passengers to file complaints without fear of retaliation. Each report would be reviewed by an independent team, ensuring unbiased investigations. Equity in promotion and hiring. Serena wanted diversity to be reflected at all levels of the company. This meant reviewing and revamping hiring practices, ensuring that opportunities for advancement were open to everyone, and providing mentorship programs for underrepresented groups within the company. Customer experience overhaul. The airline would adopt a new customer service protocol focused on empathy and understanding. Flight attendants, pilots, and ground staff would receive specialized training in managing conflicts with professionalism and respect, ensuring that no one else would ever experience the kind of treatment Serena had endured. Empathy in Action Workshops. A groundbreaking addition, this component involved real-life role-playing exercises, where employees would experience situations from the perspective of different customers. This immersive experience would allow staff to understand the impact of their actions firsthand, promoting a deeper sense of empathy. As she presented each component, Serena could see the expressions on her employees' faces shifting. For some, there was admiration. For others, reluctance. But overall, she saw a dawning realization that this was not a superficial change. It was a complete reimagining of what the airline stood for. To those who feel uncomfortable with these changes, Serena addressed directly, "I understand that adapting to new values can be challenging. But I ask you to see this as an opportunity to grow. We all have biases, consciously or unconsciously, and now is the time to confront them. Together, we're going to build a culture that we can all be proud of. And if you don't see yourself as part of this journey, then this might not be the right place for you anymore." She knew that her last statement would be polarizing, but it was necessary. Serena wanted only those who truly believed in her vision to be part of her company. There was no room for complacency or resistance to equality. After the meeting, the responses from employees began pouring in. Serena had anticipated mixed reactions, but what surprised her was the overwhelming positivity. Messages flooded her inbox from employees who were moved, inspired, and ready to support her in this monumental endeavor. One email from a young flight attendant named Alana brought a tear to her eye. Alana shared her experience of being an immigrant and how she had often felt invisible and misunderstood by her peers. She thanked Serena for her courage and expressed hope that she could finally work in an environment where she felt respected for who she was. Another message came from a pilot who admitted to initially being skeptical of the changes. He shared his experience of witnessing passengers being mistreated due to bias and acknowledged that he, too, had been part of the problem by staying silent. Now he felt empowered to be an ally in creating a more inclusive environment. But there was also pushback. A handful of senior employees, who had been with the airline for decades, were resistant to what they saw as overly progressive changes. Serena received word that a few employees had even handed in their resignations, unwilling to adjust to the new culture. It was disappointing, but Serena remained steadfast. She knew that not everyone would be ready for change, and she respected their choice to leave. The following weeks saw the launch of the training sessions, and Serena took a personal interest in attending some of them. She sat among her employees, participating in discussions, listening to their concerns, and sharing her own experiences. Her presence sent a powerful message. This wasn't just a corporate mandate, it was a movement she was leading by example. One session, titled Empathy in Action, stood out to her. Employees took turns stepping into role-playing exercises, experiencing scenarios where they faced discrimination or mistreatment. Serena watched as her employees struggled, some visibly emotional as they realized the impact of their actions. At the end of the session, a burly baggage handler named Mike, who had initially been dismissive of the program, approached her. His eyes were red, his voice shaky. "Ms. Jackson, I've been doing this job for 25 years. I always thought I was fair. But today, I realized I've been part of the problem. I've ignored things I shouldn't have. I'm sorry." Serena placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Mike. Change isn't easy, but acknowledging it is the first step. And together, we'll make sure no one feels ignored or mistreated here again." As Serena reflected on the progress her company was making, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The changes were happening, slowly but surely. The airline was evolving, and her vision of a fair, inclusive, and respectful company was becoming a reality. She knew the journey was far from over, and there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time, Serena felt hope, not just for herself, but for every person who would walk through the airline's doors. Her message was clear. Dignity and respect were no longer optional. They were the foundation upon which her company and her legacy would stand. Turning the tide of change. Weeks turned into months, and Serena's reforms at the airline started gaining momentum. The changes she initiated weren't just visible, they were palpable. Employees who once felt marginalized began to see themselves reflected in the policies and practices around them. Serena's vision of a dignified, inclusive workplace was slowly becoming reality, but the journey was far from over. Resistance still lingered, both from within the organization and from external forces that questioned her motives. One morning, Serena arrived at the headquarters to find an invitation waiting on her desk. It was a formal request from the airline industry's leading regulatory body, asking her to speak at their annual summit. The theme this year was A New Era in Aviation, Equality and Inclusivity in the Skies. Serena's heart raced with excitement and a hint of anxiety. This was her chance to set a new standard for the industry, to make her voice, and the voices of those who had been silenced for too long, heard on an international platform. Preparing for the summit consumed her days and nights. Serena knew that if she was to speak on behalf of her airline, she needed not only facts and figures, but personal stories that would resonate. She met with employees from various departments, gathering first-hand accounts of how the reforms had impacted them. Many shared stories of newfound respect, open conversations, and unexpected friendships that blossomed across cultural and racial lines. One particular story struck Serena deeply. A young woman named Alina, originally from a small village in Eastern Europe, had worked as a ground staff member for nearly 3 years. She recounted how, in the past, she'd been made to feel invisible, with senior staff often ignoring her or dismissing her ideas. After the new initiatives were implemented, she started to feel a sense of belonging. For the first time, she was encouraged to contribute, and her suggestions for improving baggage handling efficiency were not only heard but also implemented. Alina beamed with pride as she told Serena how she felt like she was finally valued as an essential part of the team. Then there was Marcus, a veteran pilot who initially had reservations about the new policies. As a man who had flown for the airline for over 20 years, he was set in his ways and believed that the focus on cultural sensitivity was an unnecessary shift. However, after attending the empathy training sessions, his perspective shifted. He told Serena that he realized he had been unknowingly dismissive of certain passengers' requests, brushing them off due to biases he hadn't been aware he held. Now, Marcus was not only an advocate for the changes, but had even volunteered to lead some of the workshops himself. Serena felt a swell of pride as she listened to these accounts. They were proof that real, meaningful transformation was taking root. The day of the summit arrived. Dressed in a classic black suit that exuded both elegance and authority, Serena entered the grand hall where hundreds of industry leaders, journalists, and stakeholders had gathered. As she approached the stage, she could feel the weight of their gazes, some curious, others skeptical, but many hopeful. Taking a deep breath, Serena stepped up to the podium, her presence commanding the room. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you all today. We stand at a critical juncture in our industry, one that demands not only introspection but action. For far too long, our industry has been resistant to change, clinging to outdated practices that do not reflect the diverse, global world we serve." She paused, allowing her words to resonate. But change is no longer optional, it is essential. My airline, like many others, has had to confront uncomfortable truths about our treatment of both employees and passengers. And as many of you know, my journey to this stage began with a personal experience, a moment of public humiliation that I could have allowed to make me bitter. Instead, I chose to turn it into an opportunity for growth, not just for myself, but for the entire airline. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. Serena continued, her voice gaining strength. "We introduced new policies, but policies alone do not create change. Change requires heart. It requires empathy, respect, and the courage to confront biases that, though they may be invisible, are deeply ingrained. My company is committed to building a culture of dignity where every person, whether they are a passenger, an employee, or a partner, is treated with the respect they deserve. She shared stories like Alina's and Marcus's, illustrating how the changes were affecting real people. As she spoke, she saw heads nodding in the audience, some eyes filling with empathy. Serena knew she was reaching them. As leaders, we have a responsibility, she said in closing, not just to generate profit, but to set a standard for how businesses should operate in a diverse, interconnected world. I am here today to urge each of you to examine your own practices, to listen to those whose voices may have been ignored, and to commit to a future where the skies are truly open to all. The success of our industry depends not on our ability to build planes or streamline operations, but on our ability to see, to respect, and to value every human being who steps onto our flights. As she stepped down from the podium, a wave of applause swept through the room, louder and more sustained than she had anticipated. Industry executives approached her afterward, some commending her, others seeking advice on how they could begin similar initiatives. Serena felt a surge of optimism, knowing that her words had ignited something larger than herself. Back at the airline, the positive impact of Serena's speech was evident. Her employees took pride in being part of a company that was now viewed as a pioneer in inclusivity and respect. The new policies became a source of unity rather than division. Employees who had once felt unseen now felt empowered, and managers who had been skeptical were becoming advocates for Serena's vision. One afternoon, Serena was walking through the main office when she noticed a familiar face waiting by the reception area. It was Bethany, the flight attendant from that fateful flight. Serena was momentarily taken aback. She hadn't seen Bethany since the investigation had led to her suspension. Bethany looked nervous, her hands clutched tightly together, her gaze lowered. "Ms. Jackson," she said quietly, "may I speak with you for a moment?" Serena nodded, leading her to a quiet conference room where they could speak privately. She could sense Bethany's discomfort, the weight of guilt and regret hanging over her. "I don't expect forgiveness," Bethany began, her voice trembling. "But I wanted to thank you for what you've done with the airline. When I treated you the way I did, I didn't realize how much harm I was causing. I thought I was just following protocol, but now I see that I let my own prejudices dictate my actions. I've taken the empathy training, and I've seen things in myself that I wish I hadn't ignored for so long." Serena listened, her face calm, but her mind processing Bethany's words. She could hear the sincerity in Bethany's voice, the remorse that came from genuine self-reflection. "I've lost my job," Bethany continued, tears brimming in her eyes. "But in a way, I think it was the wake-up call I needed. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. And thank you for showing me that I was wrong, for showing everyone that change is possible." Serena took a deep breath, moved by Bethany's vulnerability. She knew that forgiveness was a powerful tool, one that could facilitate healing and growth. She reached out and placed a gentle hand on Bethany's arm. "Thank you for coming to me, Bethany," she said softly. "I can see that you've done some soul-searching, and that takes courage. I'm glad that you're learning and growing from this. Mistakes don't define us. It's how we choose to move forward that does." Bethany nodded, a look of relief mingling with her sadness. Serena knew that Bethany would carry this lesson with her for the rest of her life, and perhaps, in her own way, she would help bring about change wherever her future took her. The internal changes within the airline did not go unnoticed by the public. Passengers began sharing their positive experiences on social media, with stories about staff going above and beyond to ensure comfort and respect. Word spread about the airline's commitment to treating everyone equally, and soon it became one of the most trusted and respected names in aviation. The media also took note. Serena's journey, from a moment of personal humiliation to a trailblazing transformation, became a beacon of hope for other industries struggling with similar issues. News outlets hailed her as a visionary, a leader who wasn't afraid to face adversity head-on and turn it into a force for good. As for Serena, she continued to push forward, always looking for ways to improve and evolve. She knew the journey wasn't over, that there would always be new challenges, new biases to address, and new ways to create a culture of respect. But she was no longer alone in her mission. She had an entire airline behind her, a team of people who shared her vision, and a growing network of supporters across the globe who believed in her cause. In her heart, Serena knew that the changes she had implemented went far beyond her airline. They were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of prejudice and injustice, people could rise above, choose empathy, and create a better world. With every flight that took off, Serena's legacy soared, reaching beyond the clouds, inspiring countless others to believe in a future where dignity and respect were not just ideals but realities. And as she watched her airline flourish, Serena felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had not only reclaimed her dignity, but had given it wings to carry others along the path of justice and equality. Legacy of dignity and a new era in the skies. Months after her landmark speech at the industry summit, Serena Jackson's reforms at the airline had solidified into a powerful movement that rippled across the aviation industry and beyond. But while the visible changes were profound, Serena knew that the fight against prejudice was ongoing. She wanted to ensure that her airline would continue as a beacon of respect and inclusivity long after her tenure. For Serena, this wasn't just a career achievement, it was the defining purpose of her life. Serena's airline was now known for more than just luxury and convenience. Passengers appreciated the airline's emphasis on treating each customer with dignity, and employees spoke proudly of their roles in what was now widely regarded as the most inclusive airline in the industry. The work environment had transformed, fostering a culture where everyone felt valued and empowered to bring their whole selves to work. But Serena knew that, as powerful as her reforms were, real change required constant nurturing. To protect and preserve the values she'd instilled, she was ready to establish a legacy that would outlast her. One morning, Serena called a meeting with her executive team, unveiling her plans to form an independent oversight committee dedicated to upholding the airline's principles of equality and respect. This committee, she explained, would include employees from all levels: pilots, flight attendants, ground staff, customer service agents, and even passengers. They would act as both watchdog and advisor, ensuring that the airline remained committed to its values and addressing any breaches of conduct with transparency and fairness. "I want this committee to be more than a formality," Serena emphasized to her team. "It should be empowered to make real changes, even if that means challenging us in management. This committee will protect what we've built here long after we're gone." The idea was revolutionary. In an industry often driven by profits and efficiency, few companies dared to implement such a bold measure. But her team, having witnessed the impact of her reforms firsthand, understood the value of this vision. They offered their full support, pledging to uphold the integrity of the committee and ensure that it would not be influenced by corporate pressures. As the committee formed and began its work, Serena took a step back to focus on creating partnerships with other airlines and aviation institutions. She envisioned a broader network that could elevate industry standards, making dignity and respect a priority in airlines across the world. She wanted her airline's model to become a blueprint for others, a way to influence the world through one of the most global industries in existence. One of her first steps was partnering with a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting workplace equality. Together, they developed a series of workshops and training sessions that could be adopted by other airlines, teaching employees how to identify and counteract biases. They created resource kits for companies that wanted to follow Serena's path, from introductory courses on cultural sensitivity to programs that helped executives build inclusive corporate cultures. In the midst of this, Serena received an invitation to a prestigious global leadership conference held annually in Geneva. Leaders from various sectors gathered to discuss the biggest challenges facing the world, from climate change to human rights. Serena was honored to be invited, and saw it as an opportunity to extend her influence even further. As she prepared her speech for the conference, Serena reflected on her journey. She thought back to the moments of humiliation and pain, to the slap that had catalyzed her mission for justice, and to the people she'd met along the way. Bethany, Marcus, Alina, and so many others who had been touched by her work. She felt a sense of pride and purpose, knowing that her experience had been transformed into something so much larger than herself. In her address, Serena spoke not only of the airline industry, but of a world where every human interaction was guided by empathy and respect. Our actions, she said, define the cultures we live in. When we choose respect over prejudice, understanding over judgment, we create ripples of change that impact lives in ways we cannot imagine. True progress isn't about reaching the top. It's about lifting others along the way. Her words were met with a standing ovation, and her speech was covered by major media outlets around the world. Leaders from various industries approached her afterward, seeking advice on implementing similar reforms within their organizations. Serena had become more than a CEO. She was a symbol of courage and justice, a beacon for anyone who had ever been dismissed, humiliated, or underestimated. Back at her airline, Serena's influence continued to reshape the company's culture. The Oversight Committee began meeting monthly, reviewing both employee and passenger feedback, and working closely with the HR and management teams to address issues promptly. Their transparency and dedication fostered a newfound trust among employees, who felt seen and heard in a way they never had before. One day, a surprising letter arrived at Serena's office. It was from William, the former pilot who had been involved in the original incident. She hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. But as she read his words, she felt a deep sense of resolution. In the letter, William acknowledged his actions, expressing remorse and recounting how he had undergone a long period of reflection. He had lost not only his job but also his sense of self-respect, and it had taken him months to rebuild his life. However, William wrote that he had recently joined an advocacy group focused on promoting respect and equality within aviation. He credited Serena's reforms as his inspiration, admitting that they had forced him to confront parts of himself that he hadn't been willing to see before. "I don't ask for forgiveness," he wrote, "but I want you to know that I am grateful for the changes you've made. I am trying to live a life that honors the values you've instilled in your airline. I hope in some small way I can contribute to the movement you've started." Serena felt a surprising wave of compassion. She knew that real change was often messy and painful, and she was grateful to see that even those who had once been part of the problem could become part of the solution. She decided to reach out to William, offering to connect him with her network of advocates in the aviation industry. She saw it as a way to extend an olive branch, and perhaps to help him contribute to a better future. As the year drew to a close, Serena reflected on the incredible transformation her airline had undergone. Passenger satisfaction had reached unprecedented heights, and the airline's reputation had grown stronger than ever. In a world where headlines often focused on the failures and conflicts of corporations, Serena's airline had become a symbol of hope and progress. One evening, Serena hosted a gathering for her employees and their families. The company cafeteria was transformed into a festive hall, with food, decorations, and music from around the world, celebrating the diversity of backgrounds and experiences that made up the airline. As she looked around, Serena felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond any financial or professional achievement. She had created not just a company, but a community. Standing at the microphone, she addressed her team one last time that night, her heart full of gratitude and pride. "Together," she said, "we've shown the world that kindness, respect, and equality aren't just ideals. They're actions. They're choices we make every day with every person we encounter. This airline, this family we've built, is proof that we can transform not just our workplaces, but the world around us." The crowd erupted into applause, and Serena felt a swell of joy as she watched the faces of her employees, young and old, from every corner of the globe, lit with pride. Her vision had become their reality, a living testament to the power of resilience and determination. As the night wore on, Serena found herself standing by a window, gazing out at the stars. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the obstacles she had overcome, and the lives she had touched along the way. She knew that there would be more battles to fight, more challenges to face, but she was ready for them. For Serena Jackson, the journey of justice, respect, and dignity had only just begun, and as she looked into the night sky, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She had turned her moment of pain into a legacy of strength, a legacy that would carry others forward, long after she was gone. In the silence of that moment, Serena knew that she had truly changed the world, one flight at a time.